European prisons hold more than 1.5 million people. Almost all will return to society. Yet while in prison, they live at a large physical and symbolic distance from society. Reintegration in society after a prison sentence is hard. So hard that it can jeopardize public safety. The concept of prison was designed over 200 years ago. So why not rethink this concept? No large institutions, but small houses, detention houses, familiar in shape and size. Houses that offer individually tailored support, where each resident is known by his or her own name, character, needs, and aspirations, with different security measures, education, counselling, and work. Detention houses are located in the community, allowing for a two-way interaction. Local teachers, volunteers, social workers and neighbours can offer their support to people in detention, while the detention houses can add value to the community with their own services, like a repair shop, restaurant, or coffee bar. Inclusive detention houses are valuable for incarcerated people, communities and society at large. So why not replace the 19th century concept with a concept that is genuinely fit for the 21st century? Curious?
In many European countries, the organizations of the rescaled movement advocate for the replacement of prisons with small-scale detention houses. In the barrier-breaking live streams, we explore the different barriers to reach that goal. And today we explore political support. Only if there is enough political support, good ideas can become good policies. But getting political support is not always easy. How do you get it on the agenda? How do you make it mainstream? And how do you find politicians that are not afraid to alienate hard-on-crime voters and dare to become real change makers? Today we look at Belgium. Small-scale detention is becoming mainstream from the left to the centre-right. Houses made it to the coalition agreement of the new government, and 2 houses will be opened this year alone. What is the secret to the success? Is it durable? And what can other countries learn from this example? This we asked to 3 flag bearers of small-scale detention houses in Belgium who have played a crucial role in getting here. They are not the outside lobbyists or activists, but the key players themselves, politicians and policymakers. Welcome to a barrier-breaking live stream, Political Support.
Small-scale detention houses can add value to the criminal justice system. This is recognised by the government because detention houses enable restoration, improve reintegration, and differentiate an individually tailored approach. The written support is there. Are policymakers ready? Let's ask them.
And this event consists of 2 parts. In the first part, we ask our guests their experience and perspective on how political support is created. And in the second part, we discuss 2 dilemmas the rescaled movement faces in creating political support. And we ask their advice. And then we also do a Q&A with our speakers where we can have all your questions to them. My name is Rogier Elshout. I'm a moderator of events by profession and from the Netherlands, so I'm an outsider enough to ask all these questions, but I'm also a board member of Rescaled Europe, so I'm insider enough to know what we're talking about. And in this webinar, we'd also like to hear your voices. On the right side of the video screen, you see a voting screen. On this screen during the event, new questions will appear. And the first question we have to you is, where are you? And yeah, we see people here in a lot from Belgium, some people from the Netherlands, someone from Portugal, Switzerland. So we have people from around Europe, but the other parts of the world are still empty. Well, maybe they will come later. And the second question we have to you is, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to political support for houses? And some people say fear, no support of the general, a wrong image of prisons, short-term thinking of politicians, people just don't know it, and a negative public opinion. Public opinion is becoming bigger, so that might be a very important thing to this. In this voting system, you can also ask your questions. If you go a little bit down below the question, maybe you have to scroll a little bit in it, you will see the option Q&A. Here you can post your questions to our speakers regarding political support for houses. You can also see each other's questions, and if you see a question that you really like, you can give it a thumbs up, and then the more thumbs up it gets, the higher it will float in our stack of questions. So we have a little bit of democracy in which questions we're going to ask our guests of today. So public opinion we see. And another question we have for you is, when is this event a success for you? So we'd like to know from you, you are tuning into this live stream, what would you like to see today that you think, yeah, this really helps us getting a little bit further in replacing all the prisons around the world, maybe, with detention houses. Well, one person I can definitely ask this is the organizer, because in the running up to our big European talk show next year, where we discuss all the barriers, all the national groups of Reskilled organize one of these live streams. And this episode is organized by the Belgium chapter and the founding fathers, I may say, of the Reskilled, the Huizen. Manu Pintelon is a criminologist and the Belgian coordinator of Reskilled, and together with Noah Shozan, he is the organizer of this event. Manu, why do we need to talk about political support? Why is Belgium a good case study? And when is this event a success for you?
Thank you very much, Rogier. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the live stream of Reskilled Belgium. We are so glad you are joining us today. As Rogier already said, today is about the obstacle political support for detention houses. We have three very interesting speakers who can give us some crucial insights into political support. We will listen to their story and how they are confronted with this topic of detention houses in the past, nowadays, and existing future plans, especially about political support. Is there political support in Belgium? How do you create political support? And if there is a support base, who or what is that precisely? A very difficult topic, but I'm sure our speakers, with their different angle of approach, can give us some logical insights and maybe even provide us with some very important information. I will now take first the time to briefly introduce our three speakers more in detail. Who are they and why are they so interesting regarding detention houses? Here we go. So on the first screen, you will see Stefaan Vanhecke. He is a member of the Belgian Federal Parliament for the Ecological Party Groen. Vanhecke is known for his expertise on justice, as he is a member of the Justice Committee since 2007. As he strongly believes in the concept of reskilled, Vanhecke has devoted time and energy to help build up a political support base for detention houses. He will definitely share with us today his experience and how the political support base for detention houses has changed through the years. On the second screen, we will see Koen Geens. Koen Geens is a former Minister of Justice and Deputy Prime Minister in the governments of Charles Michel and Sophie Gomez. As a Minister of Justice, he put small-scale detention on the Belgian map. He created and implemented the concept of transition houses. This is a detention house for people at the end of their sentence. Therefore, he needed political support, so he can tell us more about how that went and how that was created. On the third screen, we will see Mathilde Steenbergen. She was prison director and worked as justice and prison advisor, and is now director of the Justice Policy Cell of our Minister of Justice, Vincent van Quickenborne. It is her policy cell that includes detention houses in the policy note, and thus has helped emphasize political support. Mathilde Steenbergen will give us information about the current policy and can tell us something or what support she needs from the political landscape to implement detention houses. Unfortunately, our fourth speaker, Paul Magnet, couldn't make it last minute. But thus, overall, a special thanks to all three panelists to be here today and to share their knowledge with us. Let's now give the floor first to our founding father, Hans Claus, who will tell you something more about the way he experienced political support for detention houses over the year and why we need this support so badly. I hope you enjoy every second of it.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see so many interested in the future of detention houses. A special thanks to our panelists and the people who organized this event. I am Hans Kloos, prison director and artist. I'm the founder of Visit with the Huizen, and I, together with others, developed the concept of detention houses. As many of you already know, we present detention houses as a solution for old prison concept. In time, we would like to replace all prisons with small-scale detention houses that are integrated in the community. This would be a detention concept that fits our 21st century and our current expectations of the deprivation of liberty. Today, however, we will not focus on the concept of detention houses as such, but on the political support for our concept. We can propose whatever we want, but will it ever happen? People have told me politicians are not interested in the way incarcerated people are treated because they cannot win votes with it. Even if they do, in this era of budget cutting, they surely will not risk their career by advocating to spend more money on it. You cannot ask them to change the paradigm of punishment into more civilized forms when the trend in society is to be tougher on crime. These were all things I heard when I was launching the campaign to change prisons into small-scale detention houses. In short, practitioners and scientists have been crying for fundamental change for a long time, but there only ever seems to exist room for minor, marginal interventions, such as better training for staff, or of course, building new prisons. However, the choice to make a real shift in punishment remains a political choice. And in a representative democracy, this choice is up to politicians. That's why the Belgian project of the Huizen started by contacting politicians. From 2011 to 2012, in the initiative of our movement, politicians gathered in a strategic working group and designed the features of what is now an ongoing process in making a fundamental change. Why did they do so? And moreover, how do they proceed? Their story can inspire rescaled movement that is advocating our paradigm shift in other European countries. I'm so glad they are willing to share their views and their experience at the local level as a Minister of Justice, as Member of Parliament in the opposition or within majority, as President of a political party, or as a political advisor. This can be so educational for all of us. Let's get the debate started and let's find out how policymakers think about our concept. In which way is it already integrated in their current policy? I hope everyone enjoys our event and remember to keep advocating for structural change, because that would definitely bring us a better penitentiary future.
Kijk, nou, wonderful. Thank you so much, Hans. And yeah, in the meantime, we asked our audience, when is this live stream a success for you? And we see awareness, concrete solutions, and when we hear something new, to be informed, but also when the politicians are also listening and taking it home, but also when I know how politicians see the detention houses of today and knowing how you can manage the politicians and create their support. So a lot of people are really interested, how can we create support for these detention houses ourselves? Well, and who are better equipped than to explain this to us than our speakers? They were already introduced by Manu. Mr. Vanhecke, you are a member of parliament for Groen, the ecological party. You are a long-serving member of the Justice Committee. You have survived many governments in Belgium. And I've been told you are sometimes called the Wikipedia of the Justice Committee. You are supposed to know everything. I've been told you have played a crucial role in putting this on the agenda and getting it from a fringe idea into the mainstream of politics. When did it start? What was the moment that you first heard of detention houses, and why did it appeal to you so much?
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone on the screen. Good afternoon, everyone, and special thank you for the organizers of this webinar. I'm very delighted with this invitation, and I'm here to outline the long journey we have traveled in Parliament during the last decade. Our goal has been to put that beautiful and strong idea of detention houses on the political agenda and try to realize it. Another reason for my...
Before you get started on your presentation, because you have a presentation, we have some slides with it. I'm going to give the floor to you shortly. First, I want to introduce also the other speakers. Mr. Vanhecke, do you remember the year when it started? How many years already are you involved in small-scale detention?
It must have been about 10 years ago. And then I had contact with Hans Claus, of course. We saw him. I think he's a little bit the founding father of the idea here in Belgium. And I accepted the challenge to support the ideas via what he called a strategy working group of the Huizen. But I can say I was not alone there, because 10 years ago, who was invited also around the table, that's the present Minister of Justice, Meneer Van Quickenborne. Also 10 years ago, we found each other around the table with Hans Claus, discussing about that idea and how we could try to realize it in Belgium. So it's about 10 years that we are trying to work on it.
Wow, that's okay. And you've prepared a presentation of a little overview of the last 10 years, what happened and what were the key factors for success. Second, we have with us Koen Geens, member of parliament for CD&V, the Christian Democratic Party of Flanders. Till last year, you were Minister of Justice for 4 years, and you are the founding father of transition houses in Belgium. There were none in Belgium when you started, now there are 2, and you even put in the law that people in detention have the right to apply for a transition house, so a house between prison and their release into society, and they can apply for it, and if they meet the conditions, they might go to one. Where does your enthusiasm for small-scale detention come from?
Well, I'm not the founding father to start with. I'm only the one who signed the law, which during 6 years I was allowed to do as a Minister of Justice. When I arrived at the Justice Department in 2014, the idea of Hans Claus was vivid, but was controversial. The penitentiary administration certainly was not 100% enthusiastic about the idea from a lot of points of view, but certainly also from a practical point of view. But there was a lot of support in civil society, mostly the left side of civil society. I'm in the center, so that's a good thing to start with. And we thought that with some small experiments to start with, the idea might maybe gain applause at the end of the day. And so it took us 5 years to have the law enacted for 2 transition houses that only apply the concept to the phase between prison and return to society, the last 18 months, in fact. So it is a reduction of the idea, but in order to make people acquainted with the idea. That is what we did.
Okay, and so for you also specifically, we'll ask you later how to get from will to policy that's really implemented, because an idea is one thing, but a policy that works is another thing, and that's where your expertise comes. Mathilde Steenbergen, you're the director of the Justice Policy Cell of the Minister of Justice in Belgium. So you're a member of his cabinet, which is something in the Netherlands we don't have. You're either a politician or a civil servant. What are you? Are you a politician or a civil servant?
I'm both. I'm a civil servant who is in temporary leave to help the Minister of Justice.
Yes. So how free are you to talk about all your opinions, or are you supposed to say what the minister's opinions are?
Internally, I am free to speak as I wish. In situations like this, I have to be loyal to my boss, but I have to be honest, my boss and I have completely the same opinion about this topic, so it will be difficult for me. As Stefaan said, Vincent van Quickenborne was also around the table already 10 years ago. I was, I think, around another table. I don't remember, near Stefaan Vanhecke, near Vincent van Quickenborne 10 years ago. I didn't know them by then. I was also around the table with Hans Kloos, but as a civil servant at that time.
Wow. You will specifically give a little bit more detail about the policies of the current government and also all the difficulties and political support that you need to implement it within the services that we have. Wonderful. So we are going to start with Mr. Vanhecke. You have prepared a little presentation also for us, and from how do you get from the idea that made together with a few people you designed, and how to get into mainstream politics that doesn't only appeal to people on the left side of the spectrum but all across the political spectrum, and politicians not only saying they want it but really wanting it. I would say take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have made a little presentation to make it more, to put some beautiful pictures and the best moments in the last 10 years. So in this process, two things have always been important to me and still are. The first is creating a political support basis, and the second is working on a social support basis. And these two elements will be the basis of what I want to explain to you today. So let me start with the political support. If we, as policymakers, go down this road of small scale and differentiation, we need a broad political support base in order to achieve it. This has been necessary for the creation of a capacity for 100 people in 2017 by Minister of Justice Koen Geens at that present. Why is this political support so crucial? There are, in fact, two main reasons for me. First of all, because the outline of a detention policy requires long-term thinking. And secondly, because continuity over changes in composition of governments is necessary. Changes in composition could lead to different and more destructive choices, so that continuity is very important. In other words, if we want to realize this policy of small-scale facilities, it has to be done across successive governments and across the parliament, and as broadly as possible across the boundaries of majority and opposition. And that is why I have always welcomed any step towards more differentiation and detention, even when I was part of the opposition in the parliament. At this time, we are no longer in opposition, but also in government, and I will keep on doing so as well. Over the last decade, there have been three important steps, I think. And the first step was in 2012. An interesting fact is that politicians were able to find each other across party lines in October 10th, 2012, after many discussions with various parties in the parliament. A proposal for a resolution saw the light. And this proposal contained a pilot project of differentiated administration of sentences. It was signed by representatives of several political parties from left and right wing, including myself. And this resolution was never debated or voted on in the Commission at that time. But we had already a broad coalition who was preparing to work on this topic. Then we have the second step. The second step was in 2017. And if we look at the composition of the government at that time, which was the government that approved what they call the master plan, the third master plan, and thus also the choice to establish the so-called transition houses, we can see how this political support was already there in 2017 across majority and opposition boundaries. The establishment of the transition houses made 2017 an important year. Even though this decision was justifiable, it was still very courageous of the Justice Minister Koen Geens, like he told us already, who announced this project at a press conference in January 2017. And then the third important moment, I think, is now. I am proud and I'm glad at the same time that the current government is continuing along this path as well. When the coalition agreement was drawn up, the question whether or not detention houses should be established was in fact no longer a political issue. The proposal even passed in a first version without any problem. The path was already chosen and would not be reversed. That such a decision would have passed without any problems would simply not have been possible 10 years ago. And the current coalition agreement states, I quote, in cooperation with the federal states, the federal government creates the necessary framework so that the reintegration of detainees would be actively prepared from the start of sentencing through individual detention plans, a strengthening of psychosocial services, and the further development of small-scale detention projects for certain groups of detainees. For instance, parents with children, detainees shortly before release, young offenders, etc. And the minister's policy statement took it on board as well, and detention houses will be created in the next months and years. What delights me most is that the government and its administration will operate these detention houses and it will not be privatized. I think this is also very important. Having explained the political support, let me go over the need for social support. This is an essential to succeed. The message of small-scale detention and differentiation is not always an easy one. I believe that therefore communication is key, is very, very important. If you explain the functioning of the concept and its benefits, example given a greater chance of successful reintegration into society, people will listen and will understand. This requires repetition and it is not always easy. You know, the NIMBY syndrome, not in my backyard, it will certainly arise when projects take shape in little cities, in municipalities. Fortunately, more and more mayors and local politicians are starting to become believers. And that's why I was also glad that we normally should have had Mr. Magnet, who is a mayor in a big city, because their support is very, very important. A push from well-known people can certainly help. One of them is our famous actor, Matthias Schoenaerts, known from The Danish Girl, Rust and Bone, and other movies. He is an ambassador for Rescaled, and this opens doors and helps to get the ideas accepted by a wider audience. So if I can come to some conclusions, launching new and especially innovative ideas and creating social and political support for them is not always easy. But the ideas for detention houses clearly show that it can be done. There is one condition, and that's a condition you need to have in politics. You need patience. Patience, especially when you're in the opposition. You need to have patience, a lot of it, Unfortunately, in politics, we are used to that. But above all, the initiators must not lose their faith and courage, and that has never happened. So, to the super motivated people of Rescaled, the Huizen, for them too, it has been a journey of 10 long years. And for this, I would also like to thank them warmly. Their pioneering work and enthusiasm deserve all praise, as they inspired politicians to take this road, and their role was crucial. The 3 steps that have been set along the road to a political support base are only a start. The real work starts now, and continuity will keep on being crucial. Our political engagement cannot stop here, and I have every intention to support every step in the right directions for, I hope, many, many years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vanhecke, for this 10 years in 7 minutes. Remarkable. One of the things you say is you have to keep, it's a long-term strategy, but how do you know that you're making steps? Because you can't have a little bit of a house, so how do you kind of measure if you're on the right way, or that you should adjust your strategy?
Yeah, it's also important to have information and proof. That's why we started by creating pioneering projects, because if you have these projects, you can learn from it, you can show the people what the advantages are. And we have also some, I think, information from other countries. In Scandinavia, there were interesting projects also. So this is very important also to use that information and to have also the academic world to study also and to accompany the steps we take. But convincing people, you will not convince people only by giving them that information. It's a long work.
Yes, it's very long term. And in the Netherlands, the discussion is very little about effectiveness and facts. It's very much from a, well, I might even say underbelly perspective. It's very difficult to reason in that. Is that also the case in Belgium?
I'm afraid it is, and it was certainly 10 years ago. And like the questions you asked in the beginning, I think there is fear because people don't know the system. They don't know the advantages of it. And that's why you need, in fact, a long-term work. You need politicians who want to run a marathon and not sprints, because it takes a lot of time to convince people, to give the evidence, to go into discussion. If I can discuss in 10 minutes or 15 minutes with someone, I can convince him. But to convince some million people in our country, that's of course a bigger effort.
What I sometimes see with the activists who advocate for fundamentally redesigning our detention system is that they very much preach to the already converted. They use words that work really well in their own world, but for, I would say, voters and politicians that are more in the center, maybe less convinced, I'm sometimes wondering, is this the wisest approach? Did you sometimes have to alter your argumentation or your framing in order to also appeal to people who are not already convinced?
Of course, it's important to use the right arguments. In Belgium, we have some famous detainees. For instance, Dutroux. If people think that Dutroux will next week live in the same street where they live with their children, they will never accept it. That's why it's important to start a discussion with a category of detainees that are where people believe that it is a good first step. Let's say, like I told you, first offenders, young people who are sentenced and sent to prison. There are a lot of not a lot. There are women with sometimes with children in our prisons. We can start by selecting these special types of prisoners to start these projects and to show that it works. So it's also step by step that you have to convince the people that these solutions are working and on the long term will be much better than the actual system.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to talk more about the argumentations that we should be using in order to get more support. Thank you so much for this. Mr. Geens. As you already said, you might not have been, you don't want to call yourself the founding father of transition houses in Belgium, but you are the one who made it policy. It's a new concept. As a minister, it's pretty easy to just a little bit more of something and a little bit less, but you opted for a whole new, to introduce something new. That's not always the easiest thing to do.
No, it is not. But of course, what you don't tell at the beginning of the story is, one, we will hold a referendum on this within 2 months from now. And second, what you don't do is say, we will change the whole system from without. You just try to gain support for a small scale project that might in the long run prevail. That is the tactics. Now, if you allow me, I will give you 4 elements very shortly that were not in favor and 4 that helped.
Okay.
What was not, if you allow me, what was not in favor is that we live more than ever, although we say the contrary, we live more than ever in a society, certainly in Belgium, where every behavior which seems not wishable from a social cohesion point of view is penalized, is criminalized. All things that happen usually lead to some parliamentary discussion of let's make a new criminal law. And that endures for many years, and it's worse than ever. Second, we have through social media and through much more active normal media, many more trials by media than ever before. So people in Belgium, the first quarter of an hour of public television at certain points of time is for most of the time justice and criminal law and big trials. 3, magistrates in general have little interest for what happens in prisons, which is of course a problem because the end destination of many of the criminal judgments is prison. And so there is a link which is not present. And you're looking for that link. It's very difficult. There are, of course, magistrates who are very active, but most of them are not. 4th, if you want these days to have a new prison in an environment, that environment and its inhabitants are most hostile. So certainly when you create small detention houses in the middle of a city, this is a negative factor. That are 4 elements that are negative. What is positive? When you go to people and you tell them, listen, in the 18th century, the only penalties that were relevant were the death penalty and all kinds of torture. And prison did not exist except as a place where one waited for the death penalty or for torture. And people say, wow, and where were real prisons? Oh, they only happened in the 19th century. And then we were revolutionary. Europe, and especially Belgium, was a country where you had the most modern prisons in the whole world. Everybody came to look at our prisons because we were a new state, a new constitution, new prisons. Most of our prisons still date back to the 19th century. So at that time, we were new. Now we are very old because we still live in those prisons, and we should look for a new method of detention, which is more adapted to the human rights era wherein we live. And then people usually say, yes, we saw on television, because there's a lot of interest of public television and even of private television in Belgium for what happens in prisons. We saw on television this and that. And yes, you're right, maybe even me, or maybe not me, but my husband could one day end up in prison. And therefore it's important, because he was my husband at one point in time. So it's not only people whereof we think that they're criminals. There are also even parliamentaries in prison. There are people in prison, MPs. There are medical doctors in prison. There are teachers in prison. There are all kinds of people that end up in prison. And that's important. A third element, which is important, is that every man who is not, or every woman who is not for humane conditions, can see that at the end of the day, reintegration and successful reintegration is the best thing to do from an efficiency point of view. It's much less costly. We calculated that the prisoner in Belgium costs about 50,000 euros per year, which is not much. At the same time, it's a lot of money. So if you can tell people, listen, we can make that period shorter, if punition as such is not that important, but reintegration becomes the main element, then you get support, even from people who don't like prisoners to get released too soon. And fourth, you have, and that was what I started with, you have to tell to people it will be a slow process. We only start. It's an experiment. And we'll see, wait and see what it gives. And Hans Claus, the real founding father, pleads for 900 detention houses. We will be at the end of this legislature, the minister will tell later on, but at the max of 10 or 15 houses. So we have 35 prisons. We are still building new prisons of 500 to 1,000 people, prisoners. So it is a slow process. It is not for tomorrow that point omega will be reached, and that is also calming down public opinion. However, I must tell you that if one of those prisoners who is not in prison anymore, but who goes to work, commits a capital crime, I'm very afraid, because it will be trial by media again. And so the risk we incur if something goes wrong is enormous. Therefore, even revolutionaries, as I am, I think, but I'm not sure, would plead for a slow pace in order to avoid that that small child that was born incurs too many risks. That is shortly what I wanted to say.
Wow. These are some very important factors. If I would combine them, I would say they're most of them are not so much about political willingness or the ideas or opportunities, but really much about the public, managing the public and working with the public opinion. How crucial is that?
Well, it is crucial, because politicians in general, and Stefaan underlined correctly that also right-wing parties are not against this project. Every politician who visited prisons is, if he is to some extent human, in favor of such an experiment. However, he knows better than most other people the distance between what people think and between what politicians think. And you have to make them think them alike. And that is not so easy. Therefore, I told you television helps. If journalists tell rather nice stories about what goes on in prison and how those people are, and has personal conversations, if they show the humane aspects of detention, and if at the same time you show them some perspective, it's not all bad what happens in the world. And if you say, well, in the 18th century, there was still that, and now we're almost in the 22nd century. Should we not progress a little bit? Imagine that you would be in a hospital of the 19th century, or that you would send your children to school in the 19th century and to those buildings. Would you like that? And then in general, they say, no, we wouldn't like that. Well, that is what happens almost in our prisons. It's humane, it's not that, but it are not conditions of the 21st century. And then they start to understand.
These are some very important arguments. If I compare the political debate in the Netherlands, how do I say this in a neutral way? A Dutch comedian has called it PVV corvée, which means that center-right and slightly right politicians sometimes have to say super populistic things because they're afraid otherwise people will vote for the very right-wing parties. So our Minister of Justice, he allows quite some experimentation with our detention system, as long as it does not go into the newspapers, and he is only in the newspaper searching for drugs in prison or saying that he's going to make it tougher, because they don't dare to say anything that could be seen as soft. And hence the discussion is not at all about effectiveness, but just about who sounds the toughest. Why doesn't that apply to you?
Well, it does apply to a certain extent to right-wing politicians who may have a certain double speak and are much more populistic in public than in private. So there is some schizophrenia, I think, in most countries as to that. But I join Stefaan in saying that in the Committee of Justice, most parties, even the right-wing parties, not the extreme right-wing parties, there is always a difference between both, but are in support of a more humane detention. I cannot say that any of those parties has ever disappointed me. However, that will not mean that they will say it that publicly as would Stefaan or as I would do. And I would say even myself, I was not very, very, very outspoken on the issue, at least not as much as I wanted to, in order not to endanger the interest of my party.
And
that is normal.
Is it important if you have politicians who are well willing, but also have to in mind that they can't go too publicly on some things, that as activists, like the Rescaled movement is, that you sometimes shouldn't push your politicians too far or read a little bit in between the lines and don't expect them to copy your words too much?
Oh, but they do. I mean, I never had a conversation with Hans Claus, and I heard part of his introduction, wherein he did not understand to a great extent what the framework wherein politicians have to work, what that framework exactly is, and how difficult it is to defend certain of those measures. Every time that a prisoner is released in a condition that afterwards seems not to have been justified because he is again committing a crime, is for every minister a major problem. And so it is extremely difficult to walk on that thin line, which is the one we chose. But it is worth being done, and we didn't mind to do it. And I'm very happy that the same goes for the new minister, who, if I may say, is a little bit more right-wing than I am.
Yeah, but he posted on LinkedIn yesterday, sometimes prisons are not the best thing for people in detention. I was like, whoa, if the Dutch Minister of Justice ever posts that, I will eat my hat, probably.
Yeah, and he's a Christian Democrat as I am, and I noticed often that he is in an environment, the same goes for German Christian Democrats, by the way, that the environment they live in is more hostile to such initiatives than the Belgian environment.
Okay, wow, wonderful. Later we're going to talk more about the arguments. I have one more question. It also comes in through the Q&A session. You said little steps. At the same time, you've also commissioned the new big prison in Haren, which is a big prison with over 1,000, ready for over 1,000 people. Isn't it a bit in contradiction with your ideas of smaller scale that you also started a very big scale project?
Well, it certainly is not very convergent, if that is what you mean. And it is certainly not convergent at first sight. Must first say the commission, the prison of Haren was already ordered before I started. I only started building, which is easy. I think a minister has to act in continuity or nothing ever happens in a country as ours. So you are obliged to follow. Nonetheless, I'm supportive of the prison of Haren, since it are all small living units. It is like a big small city or a small big city. So if you would visit it, you would not see a traditional Alcazar prison. You would see something whereof you say, well, this is worth living in. Of course, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, and I don't know what it will finally give, but we could not afford to stop the building program, Master Plan 3, as Stefaan said, because our building infrastructure is so old-fashioned that we absolutely had to construct new prisons. So I think it is it's not either or, and it's important to see that that is part of that slow process. Such a prison lasts 40 to 50 years at least, but maybe by the end of the century, we will be where Hans Claus dreams us to be, 900 detention houses. That is what I hope. But it will be, it's a long shot. And the same went, by the way, for the death penalty. It also took more than 150 years before the death penalty was abolished in most of the countries.
Okay, so it's small steps and patience, it's important. Okay, Mathilde Steenbergen, so you're a member of the current cabinet of the Minister of Justice, and this government has quite some ambitions. Small-scale detention made into the coalition agreement between the parties, and this year 2 smaller scale detention houses will be opened, and these are not transition houses for just the last 18 months. No, these are really prison replacing houses. How did this ever made it into the coalition agreement?
That went quite fluidly, I must say. We just suggested that the first time that we should go further on the part of the previous government with the transition houses, and that we also have to do something not only in the end of the prison, but also for execution of short prison sentences. We should also do something in the same philosophy. But like Stefaan said, there was not really a debate. I think the politicians are really ready for that kind of prison sentences.
Okay, that's it seems it goes pretty fast. If you're already opening the houses pretty soon, are you in a hurry?
Yes, we are in a hurry. We have a lot of surpopulation in prisons in Belgium, so we really need new facilities. And also the advantage of detention houses is that there are small buildings who exist already that we can reuse. So the moment we have our infrastructure, we just can start with it. So it doesn't take like 5 years to build a detention house like it needs for a new prison.
Yes. When we are starting to building them and maintaining them, it means you need a long-term funding, long-term strategy. So if it's a political hype, you probably have a lot of resistance from within the system that you have to work with. What does a system need from the political level that they know, oh, this is serious and this is not a hype, this is going to stay. We have to be serious about this?
Well, organizations like Rescaled are a big help for us because then we have an organization who is really supportive and who is really pushing us to go further. Also, scientists are also a big help for us. And then we need just a lot of discussion. And like the other speakers already said, we have to take it step by step so that we don't, so that we can start with little successes, not take too many risks in the beginning. Like, for example, like Stefaan said, we shouldn't start with the life sentences. We can start with young offenders with short sentences, so that we first can help the public opinion to adapt to the new ideas and the new vision, and to see that it can be a success and that it's positive for society and for security of society, because we also have to speak more the same language and to respect the underbelly feeling, and we just have to name it and to tell them that it's also a way not just to loosen up. No, it's a way to make society more secure and more safe.
And is there more coming from this government, you think? Are there new plans in the pipeline that you can give us a little sneak peek preview from?
We would like to build 10 detention houses during the 4 years to come. And also the transition houses, we would like also to go from 2 to 10. Wow. So in the end, that should be 20. That's a big ambition.
Yes. If I would say, this is a very big political risk. If one house goes wrong, if one person escapes, if one person released does something bad, you have a big problem. If everything goes well, then maybe you get a nice conference about something, a nice report. Not a lot of voters will vote for you again because it was such a success. It takes a lot of courage to then take up this.
Yes, that's true. What can I say? No, but well, there's a big evolution in thinking. We like I said, it's also important to make society more safe, and to make society more safe, we have to make brave decisions, because if we will only work with our underbelly feeling, then we won't make society more safe, because then we will put everybody in prison, and then we will release them and back in prison. If we really want to help society to become safer, it takes a lot of courage to go against the underbelly feeling. But I already noticed during the last years that if we take the necessary time to explain those things, and if we go on the safe path, not try to do this with the most dangerous people, then people really, when they take the effort to listen, they really always see the advantage. I never had a discussion once I have 10-15 minutes time, I always can persuade people that it's a good thing to do.
You could have also opted for the approach of the Dutch ministry, which is experiment and do new things, but don't tell the general public. Keep it half a secret, so only tell the professionals, not the general public, and then maybe in 10 years say, whoa, look what we have done and there were no problems with it. You actively look for the dialogue with society and support from the public. Why do you choose that?
Because there were quite some security issues with inmates or ex-prisoners who committed new crimes. There was a lot of things to do with inmates who were radicalized in prison. The prison environment is not very supportive to start a new life, and we had quite a lot of problems with that. So the public opinion also changed a bit, and now the public opinion sees that we have to do something about it. It always stays difficult to really handle towards that. The most easy thing is still put them in prison and forget about them. But we had quite a lot of issues. So the debate changed a bit in Belgium, so that we have to invest in prisons if we want to make society more safe, and that helps.
Yeah, that helps. How important is it to have support within the system? So prison directors, people who work in prisons, people in organizations around prisons. Is it important to have that support as well? Or can you just say, look, this is what we as politicians want, just go do it?
I don't know, it's fundamental that we have their support. But I must say, I worked like 13 years in the prison. I know there's a lot of support for alternative ways of prisons, because when you work in a prison, it's from time to time, it's very frustrating that you want to do things differently, but that it's difficult in an old-fashioned structure with old-fashioned buildings to really change things. So I am quite convinced, and I know that we have a lot of support for those new initiatives. And I think there will be a lot of staff members who are waiting to go and work in detention houses to do it a different way.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, good luck with all your endeavors, and also this public approach. I think that's a very interesting approach. In the second part of this live stream, we want to have a little bit of discussion. So we have some questions are coming in. We're going to discuss them. And we have two dilemmas that we, as the rescaled movement, that we face. And one very important dilemma is that which argument should we use to get political support for this transition from prisons to detention houses? And I'm not so much talking about to the already converted, but how to convert new people, people who might be a bit doubting or are afraid of the underbelly. Which arguments should we use? And we noted a few down, and you can divide 100 points over this argument. So if you think one argument is the argument, give all your points to that, or you divide them over some others. We have effectiveness, so that's societies become more safe, it's better for reintegration and less recidivism. The other ones is prisons fail, so we're not sure the new system works better, but one thing we know for sure, prisons don't work. The third argument, you could say it's more humane, so from the people in prisons perspective, it's better for how they feel. The other one, you could say it's cheaper, or at least we're not wasting taxpayers' money like we do with the expensive prisons. It's the idea that sanctions should be in a society, not outside. So we shouldn't lock people away on an industrial zone some far away, but they should be in a society. Should you talk about the economic opportunities for communities? If there's a house in a community, it can provide services or buy bread from the local bakery. Should you say the innovation argument? Prisons are 200 years old. We haven't innovated them much. It's a standstill, so we have to move on as society. Or do you say it's for better working conditions for the people who work in prison? It's much better for them, or safer or nicer if they work there. So you can divide your 100 points, and we see effectiveness, humane, and prisons fail are the highest. And the prison staff is not the biggest argument. Yeah, if I look to our speakers, how would you divide your points? Mr. Vanhecke, what would you say is the most important argument?
It's like the European Song Contest, you know?
Drews upon, yes.
Yes, if I have I must say there are very good arguments. There are many arguments. For me, the most important argument is it's safer in the long run. You give better chances for reintegration. And the sanctions are in the society, not out of the society, but in the society. So I would give, let's say, about 50 points for safer in the long run, for about 30 points for better chances for integration, and 20 points for sanctions in the society.
Okay, and thank you so much. Mr. Geens, what would you already said something about your arguments, but what do you think are the most convincing arguments?
Well, I think once you have decided what we did in most countries to abolish death penalty, a sanction should necessarily strive for a successful reintegration. It makes very little sense to have people live in a prison for 60 to 70 years, which are long life sentences where we're going to. That is completely absurd. So I like the safety argument, but I cannot guarantee it. It's clear that the human imprisonment gives better results as to people that commit new crimes.
But
normally,
Mr. Geens, if we look at opinion polls, you see that roughly half of the society thinks people who have done something bad can be taught or helped to not do it again. The other half of the population is more skeptical and thinks once you're a criminal, there's nothing we can do about it. So the only solution is lock them up as long as possible, as far away from us as possible, with high fences as possible. Does then the reintegration argument also stick to those people?
Well, I repeat, what those people say, I'm sorry, I hope there are not too many right-wing voters listening to me, but that's of course complete nonsense. To say let's incarcerate them as long as in any way possible. Let's kill them then, from the start. I'm sorry to be that tough. It doesn't make any sense. So we should do anything in order to help them reintegrate. One day, somehow. And if it doesn't work, then we have to keep them. We have a lot of internees, what we call psychiatric patients who committed a crime, who are lifelong. They are now in small institutions where they have a long stay, just as in the Netherlands, for the rest of their life. That's humane, but not in an institution where you're 500-600 in a prison. So it's a double path. Probably there are people who cannot be reintegrated, but we don't know that then at a very late stage. Don't give up before they are 70 years old, I would say. I'm 63, so I have a reason to say 70. And if they can reintegrate, do everything to make that possible. There is no zero risk in a society. And therefore, I hope that the first incident only comes after 10 years of small detention houses, because then people will be able to live with it. But you cannot live without incidents. You cannot.
So we're not sure it's going to work, but at least we have to try. Ms. Steenbergen, what would you say are the most important arguments?
Well, I would like to put another argument to the list. I think it should be in addition to prisons. Maybe that's the biggest difference between reskilled and, in my opinion, I don't think we have to close all our prisons. I also don't agree that prisons don't work. We didn't invest enough in prisons, but when we would invest in meaningful detention, I think our prisons can work, in addition with detention houses. I think it's all the staff who's working in prisons for many years, also with internees, but also with normal inmates, are doing every day their best to help them, but the infrastructure, the staff is not rightly qualified, not enough to really help them and to do meaningful detention. I think we can accomplish a lot within our prisons as well.
But
so it should be in addition to prisons.
Would you say the idea of rescale that they say we want to replace all the prisons with detention houses might be endangering the cause of getting more detention houses?
Oh, I think it's not good for the underbelly, but it's always good that there's an organization who is putting things very sharply. But if we as politicians would say the same thing, I think we would jeopardize the whole exercise. Because then the underbelly wouldn't be enough secured.
Okay, Mr. Vanhecke, you said so reintegration effectiveness is the most important argument that will win you. In the Netherlands, we had a debate in the parliament a few months ago about community servicing. You are no longer allowed to get community servicing if you punched a policeman or an ambulance staff. And a lot of people are saying, Minister, what you're proposing is not effective. It will not lead to less crime and recidivism. And the argument just doesn't resonate because the proponents kept saying yes, but punching a police person is very bad. And then the whole effectiveness argument was swept under the carpet. How can you make the argument stick?
I think that alternative measures are very important. There's not only one answer to punish, because people think of imprisonment, but imprisonment must in fact be the last measure, the ultimum remedium, what they call. And that's also the idea of the government agreement. So we have to try to find other solutions where possible. In Belgium also there's a possibility to have a work sentence, and you work for the community. You have alternative measures. Someone who is a big danger on the street with a car and causes a lot of accidents could be very, very, very important problem in our society. Yes. It's maybe better to send him to the hospital and help for 2 months in the recovery, where people have to recover from very serious injuries. So you have to find the right reaction to a behavior that is not accepted. And I don't agree that the only reaction could be imprisonment. So that's a very big.
It must be able to make the argument stick. Mr. Geens, we see from the audience, they say a lot of people talk about cheaper, reintegration, safer, but also humane. It's more humane than a prison to do this. Would you say that is a very important argument to get support, or it's a dangerous one because it sounds much too soft and like we want to be nice to people in prison instead of punish them severely?
Well, it's important to be nice, and sometimes nice to be important. But I think it is a story you can make before the public opinion if you make them realize that themselves or their children abusing drugs or having a heavy car accident could end up in prison. Everybody one day could end up there. I haven't meant to say that our imprisonment at this time does not work. We have indeed invested insufficiently. The Netherlands, by the way, have invested much more, but it's not because they have invested much more that the Dutch public opinion believes that the prisons function well. Whereas we in Belgium do have the impression that Dutch imprisonment works better and has less recidivism than Belgian imprisonment. So it is always a difficult story to tell to the public, and a lot depends on the climate in society. Earlier on, you said our ministers would not tell in public what experiments they are doing. My question would be, and what if that experiment becomes public because it went wrong? I prefer telling about my experiments, if I may say so.
Okay, that sounds like a wise advice. I want to do a second dilemma we have. What you said, that's about does size matter? Because the plans in Belgium you're aiming at are houses of a capacity of 40 to 70 people. The concept that Reskilled advocates for is smaller. It has a maximum of 30 people. Is this a relevant distinction for getting political support? So is it maybe easier to get support for slightly bigger houses, or is it maybe easier to get support for much smaller houses of max 30? And also we ask you the audience, so you can rank on a level from more difficult to more easy for the smaller houses, both on the federal level and on the local level. And the first answer we see coming in is people think it's more difficult to get the really small houses on the federal level, but it's easier to get support for it on the local level. Ms. Steenbergen, if you had, instead of opted for houses with a capacity of 70 people, you had opted for houses with maximum 30 people, would it be much easier or more difficult to get support for that?
Oh, I don't think that the amount of inmates that you allow into a detention house is so important to get this support. You don't have to exaggerate it. It has to be a small capacity, that's for sure. We don't want to put too much limits in the beginning. So we are looking for buildings, and we don't want to exclude too much before we start looking for buildings. So if we would say maximum of 30, we would already limit all the possibilities. So we decided to make it a wider range for minimum and maximum capacity, so that we can choose the best projects and not to limit us too much in the beginning just because of capacity reasons. If we find a nice building who is really good for philosophy of detention houses, but with 60 inmates, why shouldn't we do that? We also have the reality, don't forget that we have a surpopulation of over 10%. If we can help as many inmates to move to detention houses the quickest possible, we should do that. So we said we take the maximum high enough so that we don't exclude too much in advance.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Vanhecke, does the exact size, a small house or a very small house, does it matter for getting political support?
Well, I think it's very important. I think that it's easier to find support for a house of 20-25 people. I think the local politicians will more easily will be able to support the idea if it's a capacity of 20-25 people. Maybe bigger cities could be 40, but if it's getting too big, maybe it's too difficult to have, let's say, to select the group of people you want to, to put in and to have the road to reintegration if there are too many. So there are a lot of arguments. I think we should not fix the minimum on 40. I think it should be lower, and we will have more possibilities to start and find houses, buildings to start with it. Because I think I would give another answer on another question. If we have, for instance, a capacity of 10,000 people, if we make an investment in these detention houses, in the long term or in a couple of years, we should not only see that we go from 10,000 to 10,500 with detention houses, we should also try to lower the capacity of the traditional prisons, that the transition houses or detention houses come in the place of the classic prisons. In the short term, this will be difficult, but in the long term, the capacity of the traditional prisons should go from, let's say, if we are at 10,000, we should go to 9,500, 9,000, because you have the detention houses who come in place. Because if you keep it on 10,000 and you invest in detention houses, you will create more capacity, and I don't think that is a good direction to go to. But that's a difficult discussion.
Okay, we're going to see. And also, we need to see more how that also works on the local level. We have a lot of questions coming in. We don't have time to do all of them, but I will try to go over a few of them. One question that asked is, how can we prevent that big profit organizations become the organizers of detention houses? When there's an opportunity to earn money, there's always lobbies coming in. How do you keep the commercial parties out if you would want to? Steenbergen, you have specifically said the houses will not be for profit prisons.
You are very difficult to understand, I must say.
Okay, we're going to try to fix our sound.
Noise. I think I understood the question. I hope I did.
Yes. So you specifically chose not for not for profit prisons. Why is that important?
For the detention houses, we are just doing it ourselves. It will be like a normal prison staffed by our own staff. We will look for other profiles. That would be social workers and educational staff, but it will be our staff. So we won't give it to non-profit organizations. With the transition houses, it's another story. Those houses, we make contracts with non-profit organizations.
Okay. I hope that my sound has been fixed now.
No, not at all.
Okay, we are still going to try something to fix the sound.
I'm going to look at another question. The broader public already been said a lot. Mr. Geens, someone asks, why isn't it something that politicians can win votes with? We talked a lot about not losing votes, but how can you win votes?
I'm certain you win votes, but you also lose votes. And so to have a net win, a net profit is the difficulty. I met in our prisons a very willing volunteer staff in almost every prison of people that can invest a lot of their leisure in a prison. So I really think there is a lot of people that sympathize with politicians that try to favor more humane detention conditions. But on the other hand, you lose, certainly when there is an incident. So you have to be sure when you become a minister of justice that with your prison policy, it's difficult to win any votes, and then it goes much better.
Okay. Yeah, you wanted to add something?
No.
Isn't it a risk to start with specific groups that can count on the sympathy of society? So let's say women or young people. Is that also a risk? That people think it's only for the, let's say, lighter cases? Mr. Vanhecke?
You have to start somewhere. And I think if you start with these first projects, this is a group that is very well identifiable. I think also that there is, if you take first offenders, you can easily have a program to lead to a successful reintegration. So I think it is a good choice to do it. But after a couple of years, you have to broaden the group and maybe choose for more difficult group of prisoners or more complex problems. But when you start it and you want to have sympathy and you have to find a lot of, let's say, social the draagvlak is difficult. So support, if you want to find a good social support in the community, I think it's important to start with certain groups. But when you work longer on these projects, you have to go further and select other groups also. That's true.
Some people want to know if I'm a young criminologist and I want to increase the political support and implementation, how can I be helpful? So I'm a researcher. What can I do to help? Ms. Steenbergen.
Yeah, I think what we need are studies about recidivism. But we also have to invest, and we are investing in gathering all the right numbers so that they can do a good scientific research. But I think that is really important. And what could also be very handy is, like, now we have transition houses. We will start with detention houses. Is to do a follow-up study. Why not follow such a house for a period of a year or maybe 2 years, and maybe after 5 years then see how it goes with those inmates who passed by a transition or a detention house. So I think a lot of interesting studies are coming in the next years.
So there's a lot that can be do. Here we see often prison alternatives have perversive effects if they are used for those people who would not have received a prison sentence. So how to prevent this in the case of detention houses? So if judges think more easily, oh, let's send this person to detention house because prison would be bad, but the detention house would be good, then we have created a new problem.
Yes. That's one of the biggest, I think that's one of the biggest challenges. But we must say the advantage of the system is that it's not the judge who is sending you to a detention house. So that's one of the major things who are very important to avoid net widening, because net widening is a very big problem in everything we try to do. But how we can avoid it is we are not giving it to the judge to decide if you are going to a detention house or to a normal prison. It's the judge who is sending you to prison. And it's the prison administration who is deciding, are you going to a detention house or are you going to a prison? And I think that's the most important way to avoid net widening, because that's one of my biggest concern in everything we do with alternatives. What we see, maybe that's also an interesting research for our new criminologist who's in the room. That's to see how net widening effects apply to society. Because when we started with electronic surveillance, for example, well, what we see now is that everybody has to pass through that stage before they can go free. And it's always like this. If we try to invent something new, we see that a lot more people are getting or has to take this extra step. And with alternatives to prisons, it's also like this. If we started with probation, for example, I don't have the feeling that the amount of inmates increased. Now the amount of people who are getting sentenced rise, and that's a very big problem.
I do one last question. Is we talked a lot about how to convince people in the middle, but what to do about people that are very hard to convince? So the more hardliners in society. What is the strategy? Is it to ignore them or not, Mr. Geens?
Well, the strategy is never to ignore people, but if their arguments don't make sense and they don't want to discuss, which in general is the case on social media, it doesn't help very much to discuss. In parliaments, however, or in political debate, most of the people defending such a stance are people whom you can discuss with, and you can make arguments that make sense, and they will listen. So you should not lose energy, in my view, with convincing people that are not open to discussion. But once they are, it helps, even if they don't agree, but just remain silent after a certain period.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we have, there's so much more we could discuss, but we've come to the end of the time that we have. Manu, if you would, for you the difficult task to draw some conclusions, what would you say are the biggest conclusions, also lessons for us?
Yeah, thank you, Rogier. And also you fixed the sound problem, which is great. Our panelists, a special thank to our panelists and also you, the audience. This panel has been extremely useful to us, and we have learned a lot on building a political support base, whether that is for detention houses, but also for different topics. The question is, of course, to us, is the political support that we are creating in Belgium support for the rescaled concept? Today we have seen that some elements of that concept can become something different when policymakers try to implement this. These insights are very interesting and important to us. What also have been confirmed is that the strategy for increasing political support entirely depends on the national penitentiary situation and political landscape. So, however, today quite a few different approaches were mentioned, and I don't think only one is the way to go. As we heard, it will be a combination of a lot of actions. Another fact that has been confirmed is that it is so important to ask policymakers what they need. If we, as an organization, can help them by providing information or building public support, then we have to undertake these actions. Therefore, today was also extremely useful to us, and we will try to use this information as recommendations for strategic decisions. I will now give the word to Noah for the last part of this live stream. And once again, thanks a lot to everyone.
Yes, hi everyone, thank you Manu. With that, we have one final question for the audience and our panelists. We are curious to your answer of the following question. what is your golden tip for organizations who want to start building a political support base? With this question, we are referring to the how and the way in which you can increase political support. An example could be a step-by-step strategy, or as we have heard before from Mr. Vanhecke, making the concept known via a known and famous ambassador. We would like to ask the panelists to think of one way that is most important to them, so the how. In the meantime, the audience can enter their answers on the right-hand screen as well. This can be a strategy that fits in the Belgian national context, or also a strategy that fits in your country's national context. I will give the floor back to Rogier so he can ask the panelists what their one important way is and tell us what the audience thinks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Noah. Yeah, let's say I am a civil society organization somewhere in Europe or outside Europe, and I want to start building a political support base. How should I go about it? Mr. Vanhecke.
Yes, I said it before. I think you have to go step by step. That's very important. And like I said before, you need a good condition. You must be a marathon runner, because it takes a lot of time to arrive to get to the finish. And don't lose the courage, because you need a lot of energy to fight for that idea that is very, very, very difficult to communicate with the community. So step by step, and train for a marathon.
Train for a marathon. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and I hope, well, maybe another 10 years for you to have made many more steps. Thank you also so much for all the things you've done for small-scale detention. Mr. Geens, what would be your golden tip for a civil society organization?
I'm an old school politician and lawyer. So I think that the step-by-step strategy is, of course, the best one, but that's not new compared to what Stefaan said. I think you have to speak about it wherever you are. And I never missed a chance when I had an evening where I spoke with the general public, or with opinion leaders, or with junior or senior people of my party, or with professors or whomever, to speak about detention, humane conditions, and alternatives. Same thing on television. Go on and speak about it until everyone has heard, at least once, what it is about. And at the end of the day, they will join you. But at the end of the day, which is, I hope, a very long day. Thank you.
Keep telling you. Thank you so much also for your contribution this afternoon. And Ms. Steenbergen, what would be your golden advice?
I think the step by step is more for the politicians. I don't think you should go step by step. I think you should go all the way and let the compromise to the politicians, to the policymakers. It's good that the organizations have a clear path to go. You need a lot of patience, and never give up is my golden tip. But let the compromise thing to the policymakers. It's good that an organization has a very sharp view on things. You can be radical sometimes, and we will do the compromise afterwards. But you have to be very, very, very patient.
We're going to write this on the tile and hang it on the wall. You have to be radical, we'll do the compromises. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Also, good luck with getting all these ambitions that you have in your coalition agreement into reality. And then soon we will send delegations from the Netherlands and the rest of Europe to go look in Belgium to how the future looks like. And then I see from the audience some people say, go passionate, step by step, focus on the benefits, create awareness with the broader public via media and schooling, know what you're talking about, and move debates more towards the media to create more awareness among citizens and politicians. So it might be the long run to involve everybody, not do it secretly behind it, but this is the best way everybody thinks. I would like to thank our panelists so much for your contributions this afternoon. I'd like to thank our viewers for staying with us. We will put this whole episode on YouTube for you to watch again if you would like to. So if you want to know more about Rescaled and the whole ideas behind it, go to rescaled.org, and there you can also subscribe for our next live stream which will be on the 15th of June. It will be done by the Netherlands, and I will talk about a house, how should they look like, and if we have so many concepts for houses, why not use them for detention? So the 15th of June, also on our website, rescaled.org. Thank you so much. Thanks to our speakers. Until next time.